we're kind of discussing the different temple sections that we've had throughout history. So let me explain to you what these two pictures are here, and then I'll wrap up with at least an introduction to the Ophel, which is what Dad is talking about. This is a place called the Ophel. It's actually, it's a smaller district within Jerusalem, and we'll get to that here in a second. All right, so the coin that we have here on the second page is called the Bar Kokhba coin, right? And this is kind of an interesting thing because this was minted in the 130s or so. So this is after the time of Jesus, but it kind of captures. It's supposed to be a picture of the temple, right? So from that time period, this was a coin that was minted, and that was supposed to be a picture of the temple, and that's the ark on the inside there, and so that's kind of interesting.
Would this have been a coin that they would have had to pay to the temple? You know, like the temple offerings, or not necessarily?
Well, this would have been after the temple was destroyed.
Oh, okay.
So this is 133. This is right before Israel ceased to be a nation. This was a coin that was in circulation towards the end. So it's supposed to be in memory of the temple that is now destroyed, right? So this would have been Herod's temple.
Does Bar Kokhba mean son of, or is that not how that would be understood? You know, like Bar means son of.
Yeah. And so that's a guy's name. Yeah. And then the bottom one there is Arch of Titus, right? So this is in Italy there. This is a giant memorial. You've probably seen pictures of the Arch of Titus. It's a big arch-looking thing with all kinds of decorations all the way around it, and you can drive your car through this. It's so big, you know, it's a real big stone arch there in Italy. It's called the Arch of Titus. So it's kind of an entryway into that part of the city, and it memorialized some of the battles, right? One of the battles that is memorialized on the Arch of Titus is the destruction of the temple in AD 70, right? So when the Romans destroyed anything of significance, they would often, like the Assyrians and the Egyptians, would make mention of it in their architecture, right? So they would draw pictures of it, that type of thing. And so they would make memorials of their victories on their stone arches and things. And so this Arch of Titus has this relief there, this picture, and this is of the destruction of the temple in AD 70. And so that is the golden lampstand that was in the temple during the time of Jesus and Herod being carried away by the Romans when they destroyed the temple. So that is the later one, and we know it's much bigger than probably you might have thought. I mean, they're carrying it on their shoulders. Now, this first one that Moses built was probably looked more like a tree and wasn't as big as this, but Solomon enlarged things, and then later when Herod came, Herod was real grand as well, and so it probably became bigger in this than it was originally. Just like the angels over the Ark of the Covenant were small in Moses' day, but they were 15 feet long in Solomon's temple. It was so big they didn't hardly fit in the temple. It was so big, these golden angels that he put in there. And so so Moses' version was a little smaller. And so you see some other things there. You see that long, looks like a giant Q-tip to the right there that the guy's holding. That's actually one of the silver trumpets. And so they made silver trumpets. So when the Bible talks about blowing the trumpet and that kind of stuff, that's what the trumpets look like. So that would have been one of the silver trumpets from the temple. And I think that's probably about it. You see a few of those. There's a table, I think, there, right where that silver trumpet is. It's kind of faded, but there was a four-legged table on their shoulders there too, being carried. So it's kind of interesting that this is probably very accurate, this picture here, because whoever did this saw it, right? So this is very accurate of what that golden lampstand looked like during the time of Jesus. So that's kind of interesting.
The Ark of the Covenant was long gone by that time.
Most likely.
Disappeared before the...
We don't know where the Ark of the Covenant was. Indiana Jones has some good guesses.
There's no record of them bringing it back from Babylon, though, or the Babylons even said.
Yeah, there's no record of who took it.
Yeah.
There's no record of the Babylonians taking it. There's no record of the Egyptians taking it. The Egyptians defeated Israel right after Solomon and raided them. There are rumors of all kinds. So one of the rumors is that when the evil king Manasseh took over, Manasseh was doing such atrocious sacrifices in the temple precinct that the priests there didn't want the ark to remain because the temple was being defiled so much. So that is one of the rumors, is that so all of the groups like Ethiopia and some of the other groups that purport to have the Ark of the Covenant trace it back to that time of Manasseh, that the priests, when Manasseh was doing so much evil, the priests removed the ark. Supposedly, there is a place in northern Egypt. I mean, the place is there. Now, where they took the ark there, according to the story or not, who knows? But there is an exact replica of the temple in Egypt, where priests from Manasseh's day fled and rebuilt what they had in Jerusalem in Egypt. And then, as the story goes, because the Israelites sacrificed lambs and other animals that are sacred to the Egyptians kicked them out. And so they had to flee. And the Egyptians kind of destroyed the place. And so they had to flee. And so that is the story of how it got down to Ethiopia, because that was the other area that was sensitive, welcoming, if you will, to Israelites. Ethiopians today they're still Old Testament. They have a temple. They have the high priest. They do the sacrifices. Ethiopia is still Old Testament. They're Old Testament Israel, basically. I mean, they're not descended from them really. I mean, some of them maybe through Solomon. There's some stories of their kings through the Queen of Sheba being Israelite, but the Ethiopian people themselves, even today, there is a temple there that the guy says, who knows, there's one high priest and he lives there and nobody else goes in there. He lives there until he gets too old to do his work, and nobody else is allowed to go in, and he says that they have the ark there. And so I have a movie of a guy that traced that down, and he went there to this place in Ethiopia. They don't let you in. In fact, they themselves don't even go in. Only the high priest is allowed to go in.
It's been on TV or something, yeah.
Well, I have it. I showed it to you. Yeah, I showed. The movie that I have about it, I showed you guys. And so he takes it, and he tracks it down to this place in Ethiopia. So it's this big Old Testament temple there, even today in Ethiopia. And they were able to interview the former high priest, who is probably in his 90s now, but he lived there in that building for 50 years. And so he agreed to do an interview, and they asked him about it. And so I guess maybe they had translation errors, but anyways, it's kind of interesting because he was describing something real small, so they knew it couldn't have been right because the Ark of the Covenant was supposed to be big. But then when he's describing it, they come to realize what he's describing was stones with writing on it. And he said that was in the box. And they asked him, what did the box look like? He said, oh, well, it's big and it's gold. And so for him, most people that are looking for the ark are looking for the golden box. But I guess in his mind, the golden box was holding the treasure. The treasure was the two stones that were in it. And so he was describing the stones, whereas everybody else is wanting to know about the box. But I guess in his mind, he didn't think that they would be wanting the box. They would be wanting the treasure that the box was holding. And so then when they kind of figured out and they kind of got to where they were talking and they understood each other, then they realized that he is describing that he said he has some kind of golden box. And he says he wouldn't go in there very often because he said it was a weird kind of feeling. He said it looked like the gold felt like it changed colors as he was looking at it. He said it was very strange, and so he very rarely ever went in that room where it was held. But he said he had been in there a couple of times and he had seen it, and described it. He said for the most of it, he lived in there and he wouldn't go in there. And he lived there for like 50 years, and he said he only went in that room with it just a couple of times because there was something about it. He said he couldn't even look at it right. So anyways, kind of an interesting story there. All right. How much time do we have? Not much. So when we come back next week, I will talk to you about the Ophel. The Ophel is a part of Jerusalem at the base of near where the Wailing Wall is, where everybody goes to that Wailing Wall. There is a place that is still in ruins today, and it is a field just to the side of where that Wailing Wall is called the Ophel, right? And so when we come back next week, we will talk about why the Ophel is probably the most important part of the Temple Mount, not the other things that the tourists are drawn to. And we'll talk about what this is, but there is something about this Ophel. When you go back and look at the biblical story, this is where it's at, where all the action
Is that a word
through
in the
history.
Bible, Ophel?
No, I don't think so. It is, in the Bible, it's called the City of David.
No.
This is the field right in the region where the City of David was, right? And so, yeah, so Ophel is a modern day name for this area. The biblical description is City of David, right? And so that's what we're really after. And we'll talk about that next week, because you have this City of David is where so many of the things that are talked about in the Bible take place. And so we'll talk about why the City of David should be getting more attention than it is. It's just the ruins right now. But it probably should be getting more attention than it does. And we'll leave it at that, and we'll come back next week.